losing doesn't make you a loser. Losing doesn't make you less than. Losing doesn't take you from a good person to a bad person. It's just a game. Now go play the game. If you have the true identity piece of holding yourself accountable or being tough or dedicated, then as other things come into your awareness of what you need to do, you'll do them because that's what a dedicated athlete does. I'm like, no. That's not a goal. That's an identity piece.
Because you want to be so that's
Yeah.
like happiness,
Yeah.
shooting for that is okay. I see what you're saying. So you have to create a process for that.
Every athlete should know, about breathing, about power phrases, about creating a complete process.
All right, welcome to the Evolving Potential Podcast. This is episode number 14. Today I've got on the show Clint Laukhuf. Clint was a part of an elite Marine Corps unit called Reconnaissance, Marine Corps Recon, supplying military intelligence, jumping out of planes, rappelling out of helicopters, scuba diving, trekking through the jungle, and much more. After the Marines, he became a tennis coach. He's now a mental strength and/or performance mindset coach. Clint played tennis in college, where he also received a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in organizational leadership, and he has a bunch of certifications from tennis to strength and conditioning to mindset and coaching. He's also the author of a book called The Mental Strength Toolbox and the founder of Athlete First, his business that provides mindset training to athletes, parents, and coaches. So thank you for being on the show, Clint.
Dude, that was an amazing intro. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely, man. It's been an honor. I'm really glad that you reached out and that Mark was able to connect us together. I know that you got certified through Enlifted. That's obviously seems like an amazing program to go through and help people get over the bullshit stories they're telling themselves.
And Enlifted was life-changing for me. So I had completed a program called the Strong Coach, and inside that program there was a language component, and that's how I got introduced to Mark England. When the program finished, they offered a mentorship, and they wanted the coaches that are going to be part of the mentorship to be Enlifted certified. So when I got on a call with Mark, listening to that dude talk about his vision, his goals, it was literally everything that he taught in the videos. I'm like, I'm in. And so that was in 2019. And if Mark asks, I say yes, because there's been such tremendous value every time I'm around that dude.
Yeah, no, honestly, I first discovered him like four years ago and heard him talk. Was like, dude, this is awesome. This is like everything that I'm into as well. And then I got certified in NLP, and it just really enforced all that language stuff, how important it is. And it's crazy how unaware people can be of the stories of telling themselves, how it just becomes the reality, not the story. So I think it's awesome that you're able to help people with that.
Absolutely. I'm incredibly interested in NLP, and I know Enlifted's roots has some of its roots in NLP. So I'm very interested in. That's probably my next area of focus is diving into the NLP world.
You definitely should. Yeah, whether you get a certification or not. I've got like a whole book. One of those whole bookshelves back there is just NLP books right there. All NLP and hypnosis books. So it's like an incredibly interesting topic. And then I got into psychology and kind of like was the bridge between figuring out how all the top psychologists contributed in some way to NLP. It's really awesome. So definitely check it out. So I want to start by having you tell us about your journey from Marine Recon to mental performance.
So my third deployment it's called a Muse. So we were doing missions on and off ship, and we were in Iraq for 6 weeks. And coming out of Iraq, we're all sitting around a little campfire, a coffee can campfire, and going around the circle saying, hey, are you staying in, getting out? If you're getting out, what are you going to do? And it got to me and was like, getting out, and I'm going to coach tennis. And like the group just cracked up laughing. It's like, what do you know about tennis? And I'm like, oh, I played in college before. I'm actually pretty good. And dude, I want to wear comfortable shoes. And so, after that deployment, I still had 2 years left. I was in a support role in the Marine Corps, and I played as much as possible, and taught tennis lessons for free. And got certified as a tennis coach as I was getting out, and that's 2007. And I've been all in coaching since then. Where the shift to mindset happened was actually while I was a high school tennis coach, and that was one of the coolest jobs I had. Is high school PE teacher, tennis coach, and I dove into the strong coach. And the strong coach, it's a personal development, it's a business development, business certification or course, but it's actually personal development. And there were so many times I got slapped in the face between limiting beliefs and how our language affects our thoughts that I just automatically started folding it into how I was coaching. So that was 2019. In 2022, I took on my first 100% mindset student. So doing mindset coaching over Zoom, 2022, and that's where I see my business growing from there.
Wow, that's crazy. So, I mean, did you deal with any imposter syndrome heading into a entirely new realm of like, who am I to be? You know, obviously you got some certifications. I'm sure you had some footing, some grounding there, feeling comfortable doing that. But I always ask this. It's like moving from, you know, I have experience as a tennis coach. I have experience doing these things, but now I'm moving into something that's not only new and kind of unknown to people in general, but potentially to yourself at that time as well.
So there were 3 times in my life where there were massive imposter syndrome. The first was getting out of the Marine Corps and like choosing to be a tennis coach. I was so self-conscious about my playing background that I played tournaments as much as I could for a couple years. And playing those tournaments while I was a coach, I slowly got rid of the imposter syndrome. Another time was while I was coaching. You mentioned so many of the I mentioned I have a boatload of certifications. Over the years, there have been 3 motivations behind the certifications. The first was I'm not good enough. Like I don't know enough to teach these players like what they need. And so I did not want to be a limiting belief or limiting factor for the athletes I was working with. So I consumed everything I could certification wise. That gradually transitioned into wanting to go to certifications because of the people that were there, creating communities and being around other people. And now the certs are about just truly learning and growing, which is, if I'd had that mindset on the front end, like I would have learned so much more and grown so much faster. So going through that as a tennis coach actually like reduced the imposter syndrome as a mindset coach or mental strength coach, because I recognized it for what it was, as a limiting belief. And between my experiences as a recon Marine, as an athlete, as a coach, I knew I could provide value for students that were showing up for mental strength.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I went through the same thing. Like I have quite a few certifications myself. And I feel like the exact same thing happened to me, where it's like at the beginning, I'm just kind of blowing through these things, trying to check off boxes, trying to, you know, increase my value and get over some of those feelings of who am I to be a coach? Who am I to be a consultant or expert in this field? And then now it's just like, yeah, it's awesome. Not only, like you said, the people that are doing those are generally like awesome people. It's like you're meeting great people. It's a great network to be around. And at the same time, you're also learning to, you know, just teach yourself and just be open-minded and continue, you know, putting things in your toolbox. Yeah. I love that. How would you say that your military experience, as well as your being a prior athlete, has shaped any sort of approach you have to coaching?
I had a hard time when I left the Marine Corps. And so after my last deployment, I had 2 years where I was in a support role, and I felt like I had quit. I felt like I had let people down. And it took me 10 years to be good, be good with my experience. And it wasn't a gradual thing. It was something all of a sudden where I'd met up with a group of people, a group of former Marines that were celebrating a friend's life. And that reconnection made the shift where I was good with my time in the Marine Corps. That was what kick-started this role into like self-development, professional development. And it's greatly influenced how I am as a coach because, dude, I've done some badass stuff and I didn't share it with people. Going through some of the trainings I've gone through and looking back and reflecting on my life and celebrating like some of the wins, it reminded me of, stuff that you said in the introduction, and forgetting that, remembering that, and folding that into stories I have about mental toughness or focus or getting over fear has greatly influenced how I coach. And I'm able to share those experiences without it being something that minimizes what my students are currently going through. Mm. And so there's a lot of people that will share an experience like, oh, what you're going through isn't that bad because I've done this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Where I have a talent or an ability to share these experiences in a way that doesn't make whoever I'm talking to feel less than.
Making a connection through it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's crazy. So I do have another question then. Of heading out of the Marine Corps, I've heard only amazing things about the type of brotherhood that exists in the military and the lack of support that you might have coming out, and how there really isn't lots of brotherhood. There isn't lots of people you can trust. In the military, you know who's on your side. You know who has got your back. In the real world, you kind of don't. And so I know you have your wife. We talked about that a little bit before the show. It's like, how are you able to kind of get through that transition? And did you have a strong support network coming out? And yeah.
The year I got out of the Marine Corps, me and my wife moved back in with my parents. And so during that year, she worked a lot, I worked a lot, and like we saved enough for a down payment for a house in that year. It was a unique time in my family's, like, because me, my wife, my younger brother, and my parents were all living in the same household. And this is 2007, so there's still a lot going on overseas. I knew a lot of people that were working overseas, and so they gave me space and would let me talk about stuff whenever I wanted to, but I generally didn't want to. So my support network, my support system, like, was there, and just simply by being there, it's what helped me. Something else that happened in that time, the HBO miniseries Generation Kill came out, and that's an 8-part miniseries based off of a best-selling book, based off of a Rolling Stone series of articles from an embedded reporter, like during the Iraq invasion. And so every week when that new episode would come out, I would watch that like by myself. It was about my unit, but I was not the focus. So I knew all the dudes there, and so that was very, very like a cathartic experience for me.
So would you say that a part of your coaching includes helping athletes, and obviously I know you work with athletes and parents as well, to develop a strong support system? And if that is something that's important, is there a way that you suggest or recommend, being there to support someone through those hard times?
So every athlete's different. Every parent and athlete relationship is different. And so figuring out what that relationship is, what that dynamic is, before going into like, how do you as the athlete want to be supported by your parents? An example of this is I was working with a 12-year-old athlete Dad was one of my good friends and bought into the idea of affirmations or mantras. Like I call them power phrases, so it's not as woo woo.
Yeah.
So he bought into the idea of power phrases, and our series of calls was focused on preparing her for soccer tryouts, for selection, for travel team. And one of the mantras that he kept saying to her is like, "Hey, just call yourself a badass. Say I'm a badass. I'm a badass." And so when I was talking to her, I was like, "Hey, your dad told me that he wants you to say this. Can you say it?" And she smiled and shook her head no. And I'm like, "Well, why not?" And she's like, "Well, I don't want to call myself a bad word." So now you take a step back. It's like, okay, if I wasn't there to facilitate the conversation, at some point, that conversation between the father and daughter was going to create some sort of friction, some sort of conflict.
Yeah.
And so after every call, I type up a text to the parents that the kids are in. So athlete, parent, me are in a group chat. I type up a recap of the call. And in that call, it was like, in quotes, "I don't want to call myself a badass because I don't want to call myself a bad word," in quotes, to the dad.
Yeah.
And so starting conversations, coming from a place of curiosity, noticing something on the field or noticing something in practice or noticing just the way like the kid comes to the car, start a conversation. And it's hard to have conversations with kids.
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, how's your day? What's wrong?" Nothing. Good. And so I prod parents to keep asking questions. And then I prep kids to be like, "Look, this is coming. Have something more than nothing and good."
Yeah.
And so that starts the conversation. At some point, usually around the third or fourth call, we shift towards, what do you want from your parents? What do you like after a good game? What do you want after a bad game or a loss? What do you want? And one of the things I teach is you can't ask for something without being willing to give something. And so what's something that your parents want from you? And or start the conversation like, "Hey mom, I love it when you fill in the blank," to create like more of that. And so there's a lot of like mindset tips and tricks out there. Anytime I use a trick, I explain it also. So that's one way where like I can feel like I'm not tricking or tricking someone.
Yeah. Manipulating or whatever.
Yeah, manipulating was the word I was looking for. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That's got to be huge. I mean, like, and I think that a lot of parents need that, and especially to like give that kid a chance to talk, and then to have a facilitator kind of in the middle that's able to kind of keep them neutral, if you will, of like, okay, I'm gonna have a kid. You gotta be able to willing to talk to your parents, but you got to be willing to hear your kids, give them what they need. They'll give you hopefully something of what you need, and communicating their needs, and the whole thing kind of just flourishes from that point. I think that sounds pretty awesome.
And we only go down that road if both athlete and parent are open for it. Because if one's not open for that conversation, then it's going to create more conflict.
Sure, you're trying to force it.
Trying to force something or trying to change a dynamic where the roots of that dynamic go way deeper than anything I'm going to see in a conversation with a kid.
So in that type of situation where the kid doesn't want to call themselves a badass, and this leads to one of my other my questions about, building and maintaining confidence. How might you help someone, any athlete, and you could even mention how you help this specific athlete if you want to, depending on how comfortable you feel about talking about that.
Very comfortable. So it's actually one of my like favorite stories. So when she said no, like she didn't want to call herself a bad word, I'm like, cool. What do you think your dad means about this? When he says, "Hey, call yourself a badass. I'm a badass." What do you think he means? And she was slow at first, like being tough and running fast and trying hard. And then like it just started like this snowball effect of like getting up fast, staying focused. Like, being a good teammate, like just this whole list. I think it was 14 or 15 little short statements. I'm like, cool. What's the biggest for you? And she, like, right away, she knew what the biggest one was. Like, okay, what's the next one? What's the next one? And then when she had 4 or 5 down, I was like, okay, is there any that mean as much as these first 5? And she's like, no. So we created affirmations around the 5 that she thought her dad meant, but were the most important to her.
Wow.
And then we shared those affirmations with her dad. So instead of I'm a badass, it's I'm tough. I get up fast. I fight hard. Things like that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, like what? Yeah, what? Put your own definition. If you're not going to say badass,
Yeah.
describe a badass in your own words without using that terminology.
I started that way, actually. Like, what do you think it is? And then she struggled. It was, okay, what do you think your dad thinks it is?
Mm.
And so that shift to like someone outside themselves, like, hey, what do you think like so and so thinks this is? And that's where it started flowing.
Then
once there was a list, then it was able to shift to her identity, to give her ownership. And so there's such a small change there, but it's such a powerful thing.
Wow. Is there any other tips that come to mind when we think about helping an athlete to, not even just an athlete, just anybody really that's chasing big dreams? I try to make sure I bring that into the podcast as well, to build or maintain confidence.
I see that there's like 3 pillars to mental strength: confidence, focus, and emotional regulation. Confidence comes from preparation and what we believe about ourselves. And so if you have a process that's incomplete, you've lost the game because of conditioning, yet there's no conditioning component in your training, how can you be confident?
Yeah.
If you've missed shots, missed passes, but you're not putting the work in to get better at that, how can you be confident? And so part of confidence is knowing that all aspects of you as an athlete are developed and prepared. The other piece to confidence is how you speak to yourself. And so just simply like having a list of responses to that evil inner voice, using morning affirmations or power phrases that prep your reticular activating system to look for that stuff throughout the day, or to look for that stuff in competition, affects your confidence. And confidence comes down to self-belief. And so what we're saying and what we're doing both influence that self-belief.
So let's say that a athlete has prepared, and an athlete does believe in themselves, but there is a really high standard from the parent or from a coach that is debilitating in a way for that athlete. Is there some sort of way that you could help them to block that out? Maybe if you didn't have access to the coach, or the parent wasn't willing to talk to you,
The first shift is putting the focus on things that you can control. And so one of the exercises that's been happening earlier and earlier in my calls with athletes is a list of control the controllables. So list the things you can control, list the things you can't control, and then the things you can control are the things to focus on. The things you can't control are the things to let go of. And this is incredibly tough when the things that you can't control are coming from loved ones.
Yeah.
So when a parent or friend or longtime coach, where the focus is on winning, the ultimate focus is on winning, and as soon as you're under pressure and winning is connected to what those people think about you, then you're risking those friendships, that love. If the shift is on things that you can control, then confidence can increase, performance can increase, because now it's under your control. And so when the focus is on results or incredibly high standards, how much of that can you control? You can control things that influence those results. And that's where we put our focus.
That's a good one.
If parents are open to the conversation, I do a similar exercise with them and then have the shift to fixed and growth traits. So a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. A seemingly like positive and harmless statement of "you're so talented, I love you," from a parent to a child could get heard as "I love you because you're so talented." And now any situation that challenges that talent is now risking that love.
Jeez. So is there a way, I was actually going to mention that as well. Is there a way in which you go about teaching growth mindset in general? Is there or do you kind of just, I know you probably create some awareness around those types of phrases and that type of thinking, but I was just kind of wondering if there's maybe like a framework or something other than giving them a list of this is growth mindset, this is fixed mindset. How might you help someone develop a growth mindset?
I folded into the controllables for athletes, and then for parents, it's that exact example. And so I'll when their list of control, like things they can't control, things they can't control is done, I ask about intelligence, I ask about talent, I ask about athleticism, I ask about those things, and let them choose where to put it, and then guide them to putting it on the non-controllable side, and then things that can influence that.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So as far as then athletes performing under pressure, obviously staying calm and performing under pressure is a big part of this as well. And I think that's a big part of your answer right there, is just what you just covered right there. But on the emotional regulation side, let's say that you're struggling to regulate yourself in those situations where the pressure just really builds up and potentially even it leaks into the physical feelings. Do you have recommendations as far as breath work, or maybe the power phrases work as well? But I'm kind of wondering, there is that certain feeling that people get, that it's a feeling. It's not so much a conversation potentially. It's, I am just genuinely clammy, I am tense, I am all these things. How much you help someone to, especially with your military background, I mean, you've had to have learned a lot of that stuff.
With the military background, it was, you were stressed so much that you either learned how to deal with it or you failed. That's how the recon units kind of work.
Do or die.
do or die. And so, but in retrospect, there's so many things from that training that ended up connected to mental strength. And so, first off, the power of one breath. One breath is 100% in the moment, is 100% under your control. And if you take a deep breath with a long exhale, sends a signal to your brain that you're safe, which helps activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And so when athletes, students learn that, then that gets folded into their routines.
That's huge. So taking a breath in and making sure the exhale is longer than the inhale, to be clear. Yes.
Exactly. So the vagus nerve connects the diaphragm to the brain. 90% of the information goes up, only 10% goes down. What does that tell you about the diaphragm, or what does that tell you about our breath?
It's huge. Yeah, I explain that as well in my own way. This is how I think about it, is that there is a information highway, super highway, coming from your body to your brain, and it's dirt roads coming from the brain to the body. And so you can try and tell your use your mind to tell your body it's safe, or you can try to create a signal from the body to the mind to tell it's safe, and that's going to get there much faster and much better. And so I think the breath is a very powerful one.
Exactly. One of the examples I use is I work with a lot of teenagers, so they're already driving. I go, imagine you're on the freeway and you're driving fast. You see the brake lights pop up in front of you. You hit the brakes. You feel the anti-lock brakes kicking in. You're not sure if you're going to hit that car in front of you. How are you breathing right then? Tight, short, up in your chest. You stop. You don't hit the car in front of you. You look in your rearview mirror. You see the car behind you coming. How are you breathing? You're not. You're still holding your breath. The car behind you stops. The long exhale happens. And so that example is one way I drive home how the longer exhale than inhale sends the signal that you're safe, the sigh of relief.
Yeah, that's huge. So how would you say that, or can you share any stories about the importance of having mental resilience in a high stakes environment, whether that's military, whether that's an athlete in a serious situation, the importance of mental resilience in a high stakes environment?
I've shared this story, and it's a heavy one. Before the invasion of Iraq, we were doing these drills. We knew it was coming. Like we knew we were going to go from Kuwait into Iraq, and at the time, Saddam Hussein was still in power, was in power. He had used chemical warfare on his own people, another country, I forget now which one. We didn't know where these massive tank battalions were, and our job was going to be to basically find them. So as the main efforts racing to Baghdad, our job was to be off to the side of the main effort, trying to be a buffer zone for these massive tank battalions. And we're doing these drills in the desert, and I'm looking around and like, it sucked. Like we were bad. And I freaked out a little bit. I like imagined like what would happen if an invading army drove up, from Mexico into Southern California, like with my training and my knowledge of the area and my skills, like what I would be able to do with them, with the unit I was in, and was imagining that happening to me, to us. And so I freaked out. And that night, I snuck out of my tent and was sitting in between the tents looking up at the moon, and I realized that no one I loved was on this side of the world with me. That I'm looking up at the moon, and they're seeing the sun right now. And like I felt so alone, and that I was never going to see them again. And so I wrote the "I'm already dead" letter. And this was all this stuff that I was sorry for, that I regret for never happening, giving my wife permission to like love someone else. Yeah. And when I closed the letter up, the identity that I took was that I'm already dead. That death wasn't the worst thing to happen. The worst thing to happen would be to freeze up. The worst thing to happen would be to not do my job. The worst thing to happen would be for someone else to die trying to save me because I didn't fight. And I knew like from that point on, like that I was dead, and that no one was going to save me, that I was going to fight, that I was going to save lives, because I had that, there was no fear. There's no fear because I'd already, in my mind, it had already happened. And so every night when we would dig a coffin trench, so make sure it was deep enough that if artillery came, the shrapnel would go over us. I'd dig my coffin trench and sleep with my helmet over my nuts because I didn't want to wake up without balls.
Yeah. Jesus.
So adopting an identity, adopting a mindset, making the worst case scenario, like accepting that it's not the worst thing that could happen to you, and putting the focus on how you are going to be, I think is what resilience is. That resilience is dealing with the stressful situations. And when I'm saying stressful, I'm talking about driving into machine gun fire. I've seen an RPG go over my hood and explode 10 yards away. Like dealing, like living in those situations and keeping on going. And then sharing these experiences, somewhat censored, so that talking to a 14-year-old kid about already being dead isn't the most productive use of our time.
Yeah.
But taking that idea of creating a situation and recognizing that however bad it is, there's something worse, and whatever's worse, like, I'm going to deal with. I'm going to prevent that worst case from happening by, for me at that time, being epic, being brave, being like, not stupid, but doing my job.
Type of mindset of fully accepting that you may die. It sounds like some Viking shit or some samurai shit, and it sounds really awesome, really honorable. And I was just kind of curious, like, was that completely instinctual, or was that something that you felt like you had learned, felt like you were told, that you had seen somewhere that kind of like led you down that path?
The letter, like, most people wrote some version of that letter. I don't know that others went as deep as I did, like apologizing for the things I'm missing, and like asking my wife to go on, like to live. Like, so for me, like that letter was that switch, and it wasn't taught. It was just instinctual. I was on a deployment during September 11th. And so September 11th happens, and within like 24 hours, we're in isolation for a month. Like, just like no contact from the outside world, no contact from the news. We're just getting potential areas that we're going to go into, like, kind of fed to us, and our prep would change. During that time, once that time period ended and we came out of it, we didn't end up doing anything because everything was going on in Afghanistan, and we were in the Southeast Pacific. So we stood up to do nothing.
Hurry up and wait.
Yeah, exactly. Sit off the coast of Indonesia. Like maybe we're going to go, maybe we're not. We did not. But when that time period ended, I reflected on all the stuff I wish I had known before that. You know, like where were the holes in the training? And before September 11th, like we were training Vietnam era tactics. You know, so like a country prepares for the last war they were in. It's rare. Yeah, they're not preparing for the next one, because when it gets down to that instructor level, those instructors don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, true.
And so the combination of that experience of reflecting on, like, potentially doing work right after September 11th, and like feeling that need to write that letter, it was connected and instinctual. 4 or 5 weeks into the invasion, we started getting like letters would come in, and like I opened like the first one and started reading, and it took me out of that, like, I'm already dead mindset. I was like, oh no, I like closed it back up. Like, and so I didn't, like, we'd get some, like, the smaller packages would get to us, And so if my parents sent some Copenhagen or crackers or whatever, I would eat the stuff, but I wouldn't read the letter.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah.
And
Like
so it
no,
wasn't until we were coming out, I had this like stack of letters that I went through and started reading. Yeah.
it's crazy. So knowing what you know now and have gone through the personal development lessons that you've taught yourself, coming out of some limiting beliefs, I want you to potentially share some of those soon. But I'm curious first if there's anything that came to mind or comes to mind now that you wish you would have had back then, a mindset that you
Mm.
wish that you would have had back when you're in the military, going through all that hard shit after you've gone through all this personal growth now.
Mm. Going through this personal, like going through this growth, going like developing these tools, understanding story work and limiting beliefs, and being able to take control of identity through mantras, affirmations. If I could go back and talk to 30-year-old me, it would be, you did everything you're supposed to. You're good. It was a weird time coming out where I felt so small because of all the people that I knew that were doing so much more than me. And then anyone that didn't do as much, I had I had judged. So there was this fine, like very narrow group of people that I would have been comfortable sharing anything with.
Mm.
And to widen that now, to widen that perspective or to speed up the process that I went through over 10 years would be powerful.
Wow, that was such an impactful way of saying that, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I literally hit home with me right there because I feel very similar with that. Like the path that you're taking, the path that I've interviewed many mental performances are taking, it's like I'm an author and I'm a coach and I do workshops and I do public speaking and I do all these things and to a normal person just working a day job, like that's crazy. That's like that's doing so much. You know what I mean? I own my own business and I do all that's like what? Like that's these people ask you what do you want to do for a career or what do you do for a career? And it's like it's kind of hard to put into words quickly. You know, I'm a mindset coach. Like, what does that mean? It's like got to kind of like unpack it almost,
Yeah.
you know? And so I generally feel the same way where it's like the people that are below me, you know, it's like, you guys don't get it. You don't get what I'm trying to build here. You don't get what I'm trying to do. And the people above me, it's like, oh man, you're doing so much. Like, how could I ever match up to that, you know? And so, I mean, how did you feel like you've kind of come out of that mindset, I guess? What's made you feel more comfortable with sharing some of that stuff?
The one gathering I went to, like when we're celebrating one of our friends' lives, I was self-conscious about my time in the military before that. And hearing like being in the room with those dudes that had served about as long as I did, like either, you know, 1 4-year stint or two. Most had gotten out after, 8 years. And so it was kind of that sweet spot of where I was at. Hearing what some of those guys said that Buck, our friend, had said about me, which was totally opposite of what I'd felt about myself. Like he used to say that like I was the hardest guy in the battalion. I'm like, what, dude? I barely passed classes. Like I'm the guy that like barely got it done. Like the minimum standard was there, and it's like, cool, I got that by one pull up or 10 seconds on a 3-mile run. And Buck, he was a guy that like was an honor grad. Like everything that he went through, he came out like the number one guy. But then when I was driving home after that weekend and like reflecting, hearing some of that stuff, it's like I'd gotten injured a couple times and like come back from it. It's like, no, like he wasn't talking about that because there's plenty of dudes that have gotten injured and have been less than afterwards. Like hadn't been able to or wanted to go back. And that's fine. It's that when push came to shove and like we needed to do something, like let's go, let's get it done. That's what I remembered why he could say some of that stuff about me. And so it literally shattered the beliefs of that I'd quit, that I didn't do enough. Coming back from that trip, I've spoken 3 times on Veterans Day events at high schools. And the first time, it was just an ask me anything in my classes. And there was a kid that was in my class that asked me, like, why now, coach? Like, why now are you talking about this? Like, I knew you were in the military and I knew you had done some stuff, but like, why are you sharing this openly, like being this open now? And so it gave me a chance to talk about Buck and that get together with other people. So that interaction changed like my beliefs about my service. I feel like I went on a tangent from your original question. Like,
No,
what was the
that
original
that
question?
that was good though. I mean, the original question was, how did you kind of get out of that zone of not being willing to talk to people above you and below you, and having such a small window of people that you felt like you really resonated with or could share things with?
So from that day, like I swore that I was going to share my stories. So like the ask me thing in these classes, I was a PE teacher, and so like if you want to have a conversation, I'm over here in the corner. If you want to shoot baskets, or if it's the weightlifting class, you want to get your workout in, cool. And so like kids would float in and out of the conversations. I'd say something and they'd come in. But now it's like I'm I served with some badasses, and like I'm gonna share their stories and share it in such a way where it's not me bragging or the hey, look at me, I did this, but it's such a way of like, man, there's people out there that are modern day like heroes,
Yeah.
and I've gotten the pleasure to know them. And the act of sharing these stories has been very like cathartic and therapeutic for me. Um, Another enlisted coach, she was a high school teacher, and she was in charge of the Veterans Day thing at her school, and uh, she asked if I'd speak. I was like, absolutely yes. Like I'll speak. Um, And so I went down the night before, had dinner with her and her husband, walked the stage, did the visualization stuff. Like, okay, I'm here. Like, imagine controlling this auditorium. Got there early, and I'm sitting down in the corner of the front row, and like just kind of like feeling the energy of the place. And it's a small town, and 30 members of the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, walks in to sit in the first front row. And I'm like, who am I to talk to these dudes? And then it went like one breath. It was like, nah, F them. I'm the one up here. To like another breath. No, I'm going to honor them through my stories. And so like all the visualization didn't prepare me for like these dudes, small town dudes, Vietnam, World War II, like coming in to hear me share stories about my time in the Marine Corps. And so, dude, I can speak in front of 10,000 people now. Like I there's no doubt in my mind that I can walk onto a stage in a stadium and feel less pressure than I did standing in front of like those dudes with 400 high school kids sitting behind them.
Jeez. So you've come to realize the power of stories in your
Yes.
own story. That's amazing. Honestly,
And
you sound like you do have an amazing story.
I've known some incredible people.
So what would you say, going back to this thing that Buck said about you being the one who's just jump on it, just go? And to me, what I heard there was you're less likely to overthink things. And Buck being a Mr. Honor overachiever, not to talk anything bad about it, obviously, but would be maybe more likely to be thinking and holding himself back in a way. And so what would you say, in your own words, I guess, was the reason that you could be that kind of person and that he would see you in that kind of way?
So boot camp is 3 months long. The School of Infantry is 5 weeks. And during the School of Infantry, I tried out for recon and passed. And so between the School of Infantry and the recon school, there's a wait. And so during this waiting period, you're just doing like crap jobs around the base. So whatever stupid dumb job needs to get done, you're doing it. Offices need to be moved, like warehouses cleaned out, lawns mowed, like you're doing it. But on Fridays, there was an old recon guy that would give us some sort of training. And so my second Friday there, we're doing rappelling, and we're rappelling out of there's a square on the ground, so that it's to mimic like rappelling out of the bottom of a helicopter. And so it's tough to do, in that you have to like basically jump through the hole and not break until you're far enough down so that you're not going to hit if you break too soon, your face is going to hit the bottom of the thing. So you're straddling this hole where it's like uncomfortably wide. And like, so you're nervous, my leg's shaking. And like this master sergeant like grabs me by the front of my collar and like pulls me like nose to nose. It's like, you afraid of heights, Lance Corporal? I'm like, no, Master Sergeant. And he's like, yeah, me too. We don't got to like it. We just got to do it. and so like that phrase of like, we don't got to like it, just got to do it, like stuck with me. So there were times when like in training, the helicopters dropped us off so far out where we weren't going to get the mission done. Like it was like impossible. And it was just like, F it, let's go for it. You know, and he and I were junior, like younger guys in our team. But in reconnaissance, they like everyone has a say in the small team. And so it's like, let's just do it. That like stuck with me, like in reflecting, that's what jumped out in my mind, is that like when push came to shove, when the complaining stopped, when the bitching stopped, it was like, all right, like let's just do it. Let's go. And so I think I know that's why he said what he said.
Is that then a mindset that you feel like you were a proponent of or sharing at the time as well, like more of a leader in that kind of a way? Like, come on, guys, let's just do it. You don't gotta like it.
Like everyone was hard. Like so it wasn't like a rah false motivation. Like the discussion is like, wait, can we do it? Like this is what needs to get done. Is it possible? Is it? And then it's just like, and then me being honestly the slowest in the group, and then I was also the radio operator, so I had the heaviest loadout. And if I'm just like, now let's go, then it just kind of like, if he thinks he can do it, then I know I can do it. So let's go. It was more that than anything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The rah motivation.
Yeah, just lead by example. Just go get it. Just be there.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious. Then moving out of military and into civilian life and beginning to work on personal development, what were some of the limiting beliefs you feel like you remember coming up against and having to kind of work through, that were some of the empowering shifts that you're able to make at the time that really kind of like got you super into personal development and realized how powerful it could be?
One of the, so there's I heard two questions in there. So one was about limiting beliefs that I had and overcome, and then two was some of the shifts through to personal development. The limiting beliefs were this idea that like I'm 30 years old, I'd spent 8.5 years in the Marine Corps, and I'm not as experienced a coach as some of these 24, 25-year-olds. That I played 1 year of college tennis and quit. I quit being a college athlete. And how am I going to be a better coach than these guys that played for big schools and are coaching now? And I overcame that limiting belief two ways. One was by how I was playing. Like I just played. Like I'm going to remember what being an athlete is as I'm coaching athletes. But while I was playing against some of these same guys and could hold my own with them. And then at some point it was, dude, it's not about them. It's about what I can do for my students. It's about meeting my students where they're at and having like the information they need and imparting it to them in such a way that they can use it. One of my first experiences with personal development was at a coaching certification, and the instructor started going around the room saying, "Hey, what is your personal philosophy? What is your teaching philosophy?" I'm like,
that's a hard one.
It is. If you've like, the first time I've ever heard this was there. I'm like, like, I don't know. Like, I teach intent before technique. I teach this before that. Like I want my athletes to be seen as tough. Like, and then when I took a step back, and developed she said something that was really cool. She said, when you have a true philosophy in place, you don't need to say it. But if you share it with people that have known you for a long time, they'll be like, "Oh, that makes sense." Like, "Oh yeah, of course, that's your philosophy." And so over time, I've developed 3 principles with one outcome. Like, be free, move forward, do good, in order to create the biggest impact possible. And so those 3 principles like are so ingrained now that if I'm living outside of them, like I feel it in my body. Like I'll literally, joints will hurt, or I'll be sick, or it's but all of those are connected with things in my past that I don't want to happen again.
Yeah. Is there any empowering shifts you can think of pertaining to whether being a husband or being a business owner they've gone through as well?
My wife is amazing. And out of every, the different areas of my life, me being a good husband is probably where I'm the weakest. I have a tendency of being like a little selfish, a little moody, and she can call me on it in such a way that it snaps me out of it. And when I'm in those funks, like, it doesn't affect her. So the length of our marriage, I'd say, is 80-20 her, 80% her, 20% me. I was not expecting that question, but yeah.
So what would you say you had to go through then? I mean, I think every man has to deal with this, balancing. You got big dreams for yourself. You got big dreams. You're helping athletes. You're relationships are a big part of that life, something that's affecting us. And so I can't help but be curious, in those 22 years, what's some things that you had to, like, holy shit, I had to realize this, or we wouldn't be together?
There's some things that she values. And so when I learned about love languages, I had a sigh of relief and realized like how lucky I was that like hers are like quality time and acts of service. So when she's mad, I can, or if I've pushed a little too far, I can do a little bit of stuff and it is good. Like things are good. We set our finances up in such a way that she has control of everything. And like when I was in the Marine Corps, like going to be gone on deployments, like we didn't want to have to switch back and forth between like, okay, I'm in charge of this now, and oh, by the way, I'm gone now, so you're taking it over. So she was like, no, I got all the bills. Like we started off with 3 accounts: hers, joint, mine, and just gradually got rid of hers. It was the joint account and mine. And the reason mine stayed separate was late fees and interest payments. And so that stuff like has been cleaned up, but she just didn't like my handwriting in the checkbook. And so like recognizing that and like adjusting, for her comfort, like for her preference, was huge. When we first got married, I was like, man, 3 to 5 years. Like you can only put up with my crap for 3 years. The only way we're going to make it 5 years is if I deploy twice and I'm gone 2 years out of this 5. And she's like, you're an idiot. Like, no. And so with the business, I've changed jobs quite a bit over since leaving the Marine Corps. It's part of the move forward and be free mantras.
As you should.
I've promised that I won't make any changes that affect our way of life. That like if I'll dial it up, I'll dial it down. Like I can, like I will work in a way that like our way of life, our quality of life, like won't change by this. And I've proven to her over the years that even as I make these changes, like she doesn't get stressed out about them. And so,
that's awesome. So how would you say that I guess it's a similar question, but how would you say that you balance having big dreams for the business? I'm sure you'd like to grow the business, make a better business, with balancing that sense of well-being within in the relationship, or even just mental well-being within yourself.
I'm not sure. Like the balance, I've made a distinction between time and energy. And so I used to feel like there wasn't enough time, but then when I took a hard look at how I was spending time, there was plenty of time. And so now it's that distinction between time and energy and managing my energy. And if I'm hit a wall energetically, I don't beat myself up about it. I'll do whatever I need to do to feel good. Where before all momentum would stop, I would beat myself up about momentum stopping, and then it would be hard to get it going again. And so
giving yourself some grace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest with, that's the biggest, give myself some grace. And then I have a network of a couple of friends that I can reach out to for accountability. My business partner has been huge in the accountability space. Like we didn't know how long it would take to get the book done. We thought it would take 3 weeks. It took 3 months. But the way we did it was schedule 2 hours a day, and we left it open-ended until it was finished. And so having a bit of a support system of people that you can reach out to that will, just knowing they're going to like ask you about whatever it is you're working on. Yeah. And managing time and energy and giving myself some grace when the energy's low.
Love it. So what would you say are the dreams for Athlete First? While we're on that topic, what would you like to see it grow into in the perfect world while maintaining your lifestyle as well, obviously?
So I've written this out recently, and for concepts so Athlete First, the business, one of the programs I'm in the process of developing is a complete athlete program. So mental strength, physical strength, developing athleticism, and relationships. So the parent information component is for USTA, like player development, to take pieces of that program for everyone in the country, for college coaches to want athletes that have gone through the complete athlete program to be able to coach from anywhere in the world and to speak in front of parents, athletes, coaches about the connection between mental strength, physical strength, and how parents and coaches can be force multipliers for their athletes' development.
So you want to build a program in which you'd like to see coaches wanting all their athletes to go through at the college level?
Yes.
That sounds awesome.
My last year, I was an assistant coach at a junior college as a part-time gig. And the head coach bought into, like, we nerded out over mindset and leadership and stuff like that. So some of the athletes were asking me questions about the book. I gave everyone in the team a copy of the book. They knew I was working on it at the beginning of the season, and that a couple of the athletes were doing workouts on their own, but I could tell they were moving like crap. And so, when I called them on it and they were open to me just rearranging the exercises they were doing in a typical week. So getting rid of a body part split and making it a total body workout every day, but with all of the same movements they're already doing, they saw like immediate changes. And it dawned on me, it's like, man, like every athlete should know this. Like every athlete should know, about breathing, about power phrases, about creating a complete process, about body part splits are not where it's at as far as developing athleticism. When you're done with being an athlete, absolutely yes. Like, go get big and yoked by breaking your body into parts. But to run faster and hit harder, like, you need to be one unit. So you train that, and understanding like the relationships you choose. So both your friends and potential partners and coaches and what you share with relatives has an effect on your performance. And so how do you manage all that? And so that's the stuff that's going on, the Post-it notes that are going on the dry erase board are things I think every athlete should know. And it's going to fall in one of those three categories.
And what would be your ideal method of delivery for something like that? How might you go about, because I'm studying sociology right now, for me, like creating environments. And I think it's awesome that your organizational psychology degree, something like that is very cool to me. And so how might you take something that is good for one athlete and then extrapolate it into something that could be used nationwide potentially?
Think of it as turning the volume up or turning the volume down. And so the lowest volume would just be the pre-recorded courses, pre-recorded journal prompts with each lesson. Turn the volume up a little bit more. It's a community. So whether it's group calls or stuff that's unique to the community, or ideally like subgroups of athletes getting together inside whatever digital platform. The next little bit louder is teams. So entire teams being involved with mindset and relationships and going through the movement piece so that they're recognizing that what their strength and conditioning coaches are giving them is good. It's complete. And then the max volume is the one-on-one coaching. And so inside the one-on-one coaching, I do want those athletes to be a part of the community. The prep work for the call is the pre-recorded courses. And part of that is a program or working with that athlete to create a program for what they, one, enjoy doing, and then two, what they need to do.
And so, with the big vision of having this go across the nation, would it be something that you're interested in? It would be like certifying, kind of the enlifted route of certifying more coaches to teach your methods? Because obviously, if you're doing 101, you only got so much time. We're talking time and energy here.
Mm.
Like, like how do you reach everybody in the nation with this type of thing with 101 coaching?
So certifying, no. I think there's so many good certifications out there, and there's so many different applications for those certifications that someone gets an athlete first coaching cert. Could it be better than Enlifted? Could it be better than NLP? Could it be better than mental performance mastery? Like, no, at least not the first round, and probably not until certifying hundreds of coaches could it evolve to the point where it's better than any of those programs. So certifying coaches, no. Bringing on like-minded coaches, bringing on coaches that want to contribute to the full vision of being a part of the community, and then putting their own courses in. Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. That sounds like it'd be awesome. Anything like in the mind of, you said public speaking, with anything in the mind of like seminars, conferences, anything like that?
Absolutely. So I've spoken a couple of times in front of like tennis pros, tennis coaches. And the last time was simply language, architect and conflict language. One of the big pieces to Enlifted. So basically vocabulary. Other times it's been steel mace. For high school coaches, it's strength and conditioning principles. I am growing as a speaker. And so when I reach out to a conference and I give them like all these lists of topics that I'm comfortable speaking on, I've gotten a little like, really? Like, so going forward, it's going to be mental strength. I'm going to speak on mental strength. That's the type of coaching that I'm going to be doing 10 years from now, whether it's in the tennis context or strength and conditioning, but to grow as a speaker and to increase my resume as a mental strength coach.
Yeah.
So from Texas, flew out to Pittsburgh in this past January, to speak in front of a Division III wrestling team on toughness. And so it's like, how is this fat tennis coach from Texas coming in here talking about like toughness? And it was such a cool experience. And so speaking in front of teams, one of the things I'm going to do to promote the book is any high school program team that is just willing to send out one email to its athletes saying, hey, buy the book on Amazon. I'll come out and present any topic from the book that they'd like. And so I've got a handful of yeses on that for this fall.
Well, what would you say then? That's a perfect segue into what would you say are like top 3 to 5 concepts in the book that if someone was like, hey, just come present whatever you want, and like come present what you think would be great for our athletes to hear because we don't know any better, what would be some of the things that would be like your go-tos to teach people?
So if it's completely open-ended, hey, come in and teach this. The first section, there's 3 main components in there. And it's a distinction of a way versus the way. A way implies that there are multiple ways to accomplish your goal, get to any location. The way implies that there's only one. And I'm coaching from a space of a way. Most parents, most athletes want to be told the way, which actually creates a limiting belief. It puts blinders on and prevents them from being open to other ways. And it's not contradictory ways. It's other ways that are outside their understanding. And so A way versus the way, control the controllables, and reticular activating system. If those three topics, it's easily a 20-minute presentation on those three topics. But if athletes hadn't been exposed to that, then it's potentially like earth-shattering. The other is like language. So simply, words create thoughts, thoughts create beliefs, beliefs affect our actions. And so controlling the words that we use to influence our thoughts, influence like how we speak. The third one, it's goal setting, process creation. But what's more important is creating an identity connected to the process. So what I mean by that is we have a big goal. A goal is something measurable. There's no argument whether you accomplish this thing or not. Made the varsity team, number 1 in the nation, a certain ranking, getting drafted by a professional team, like goals. The process is the steps that are needed to accomplish the goal. So what are you doing now that's going to accomplish that goal then? And then what's more important is the identity piece. So once the processes are laid out, the identity piece is who you need to be to do the stuff to accomplish the goal. And the reason why the identity piece is so much more important than the actual process is because you don't actually know if the process is complete. But if you have the true identity piece of holding yourself accountable or being tough or dedicated, then as other things come into your awareness of what you need to do, you'll do them because that's what a dedicated athlete does. That's what a tough athlete does. That's if you truly embody the identity.
So is identity piece like a thing like saying a tough athlete, or is identity piece more so like characteristics, like being tough? Or how do you kind of help someone define an identity?
It's a characteristic, an attribute, or a way of being. So when I say a way of being, someone says, man, I just want to be happy. Hey, what's your goal? Man, I just want to be happy. Cool. That's an identity piece.
So just wanting to be happy is like, that's what they want. That's what they're moving towards. That's what's motivating them.
So they'll say that's a goal. I'm like, no. That's not a goal. That's an identity piece.
Because you want to be happy. So that's like happiness, shooting for that is, okay, I see what you're saying. So you have to create a process for that then.
You have to create a process. And what happens if you do that process for a certain amount of time? So what happens? So what are the things that make you happy? List whatever those are. Okay, if you do those things 5 days a week for the next 6 months, what's that mean? What's that going to do? Where are you going to be? And sometimes it's a tough thing to visualize.
Yeah. So what would you say then? We kind of talked about military. What would you say then back from your athlete days? You talked about only playing for a year and kind of quitting. And I heard some of your story from one of the other talks I listened to, your the coach's spotlight. That was pretty cool. So what would you say now, knowing what you know now, and that you would have taught yourself back then that would have helped you back then when you were an athlete?
Man, I am so happy with where I am now. And when I reflect back on my life, there's a couple of decisions I had made that would have put me somewhere totally different. And so leaving Oklahoma Christian was one of those decisions. There's a fork in the road that once I went down that path of leaving, there was no going back. In that year, we had an amazing team. And there were me and two other guys that were just outside the top 7. We were in this tie.
Nice.
And everything was a competition, literally everything. No one wanted to be partners with us in the weight room because we were outdoing each other. Like if coach told us, hey, one day we had a slow run around campus. Like, no, it was not a slow run. It was a cross country race for us. older guys were placing bets. Like I remember one of the days, like the number one dude who was like 26 comes up to me and says, "Hey, how you feeling today?" I'm feeling good. He's like, "You win in the race?" I'm like, dude, it's a slow run. What do you mean? It's like, no, dude, you win in the race?
He's like, come on, be real.
Yeah, that's like, be real. It's like, yeah, yeah. Dude, to put $50 on me.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, but it was stupid. And I wish I hadn't have been done. I wish I had enjoyed the process. That I understood what recruiting was, because there were 3 guys that were seniors, 3 guys that were graduating, and the coach was recruiting 4. And like when I heard that, it was like, oh, I'm never gonna get a chance to be in the lineup. So I got an overuse injury, and I pushed it to the point where I couldn't even walk up the stairs. Like my roommate took my rackets from me. It's like, no, you have to go to the trainer. Like even after that, like when everyone was going on a run, I would be on the incline board for sit-ups, and I'd wait till they started running, and I would do sit-ups the entire time they were running. It's like stupid stuff. And so as an athlete, I wish I hadn't have been done. I wish I knew what recruiting was, and that I'd had honest conversations with the coaches. You know, that those if those 3 things had happened, the decision to leave there like probably wouldn't have happened. Yeah.
Jeez. So what do you think was the motivator there, knowing what you know now? Again, studying a little bit of psychology and like it's the, I mean, obviously I can guess, but I mean, from your point of view, like why were you pushing yourself so hard? Why did it matter so much?
That I wanted to get into the lineup, that I wanted to play matches that mattered, that if I didn't, then I would never leave Texas or Oklahoma. Like I saw this vision of my life of forever being like in Texas and Oklahoma. And I was just like, did not, it didn't feel like a happy, fulfilled vision. So transferred schools, that lasted a year and a half, and then like joined the Marine Corps because I didn't I didn't really have any other like options. I was tired of school. I got to quit tennis. Like it's time to grow up and support myself. So like I joined the Marine Corps at 22.
Jeez. So what would you say as far as for yourself, maybe back then, and athletes now, coming off of an injury, coming off of failure, coming off of a setback? What are some strategies that are really great for dealing with those things, for getting themselves back to a good place?
It's understanding the difference between a projection and a reflection. So projection is comparing yourself to something outside of you. It's giving your power to something else. It's like you made me mad is a projection. A reflection, it puts it back on yourself. I made me mad. It's removing the comparison from other people and understanding like where you're at and you're on your own journey. One of the things that the trainer said to me is like, hey, how long has your knee been bothering you? Like, oh, about 3 months. Oh, you realize that if you came to us the second week it was bothering you, it would already be better and never have gotten this bad. And it's like, oh, I was so afraid of showing like weakness in this little competition I was having with the other 2 dudes that was, having the same exact like competition, but comparing ourselves to each other, that like I created this like needless pain and suffering. And so as a injured athlete recovering, recognizing, hey, the injury is outside your control. There's fear with going through that again. But if you take care of what you need to take care of, if you truly look back and see where the holes in your training were, if there were any, and fill those holes and attack your your rehab, that you can come out of it stronger.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, honestly, it's crazy how much we push ourselves through comparison, through I just and I think that's a part of the I'm not feeling like enoughness, not feeling good enough is a huge driver for everybody underneath the surface. And so it's like if this happens, if I am not this, then what am I?
Yeah.
And I think that I would assume that even coming out of Marines for me it was bodybuilding. I used to be a competitive bodybuilder. And it's like, if I'm not this, then what am I?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm nothing, and it's just a shattering earth like survival, feeling like similar to like, write a letter to myself. Oh, I'm ready to die. Apparently I'm dead now because I'm nothing.
Yeah. No, but that's what so many athletes. So take that same feeling, and your identity as a bodybuilder, your identity as an athlete. If you come in second, then you're that much less of a person than the person that came in first. If you lose to someone and your identity is an athlete, then that other athlete is better than you. So some of the conversations I have with athletes is, hey, are you a good person? Yeah, I think so. Okay, what makes you a good person? So you're going to walk on the court a good person. Win or lose, are you going to walk off the court a good person? And so that conversation, while they're in the midst of being an athlete, automatically starts creating that separation in identity. There's more to them than just that being an athlete.
That's powerful. So like, it's okay to be an athlete. It's okay to identify yourself as an athlete, but there has to be more.
There has to be more.
There has to be something to fall back on when the athlete identity is being slapped in the face or whatever by a failure.
Do you want to step into the biggest arena possible, or do you want to play small and win everything that you play? Oh no, I'll step in the biggest arena. Well, you're going to lose. And if losing hurts so bad that it prevents you from wanting to compete, or if losing hurts so bad that it prevents you from playing your best, like, you're doing yourself a disservice. Losing doesn't make you a loser. Losing doesn't make you less than. Losing doesn't take you from a good person to a bad person. It's just a game. Now go play the game. And like, sometimes that's a hard thing for some athletes. It's not just a game. It's my whole life. It's like, no. It's still just a game. You're going to retire. Like, you go off to college, you play 4 years in college, you get a professional deal, professional contract, you're a professional athlete. How long do you plan on being a professional athlete? 10 years? 15 years? Cool. By the time you're 35, you are done with your sport. What then? Like, so say, oh crap, what then? Like have those conversations now, to play better now, to reduce the pressure now.
That's powerful. Projecting out and kind of developing a human being along the way, alongside that athlete, realizing who you want to be, who you're becoming throughout the journey. Yeah.
And it's the same thing with parents. The number one indicator of a kid's success, like on the professional level, on the elite level, is a positive parent-child relationship determined by the child 10 years after the fact. So it's not a hedonistic 13-year-old saying, I've had a positive relationship with my parents. It's the 23-year-old looking back at what the relationship was. Man, I'm so glad, like, my parents held me accountable here. I'm so glad that, like, I got breakfast at 5 a.m., like, before that early morning practice.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And they were there for me when I lost or whatever as well, not reaming me.
Yeah. we went out to dinner. Like, we're traveling for sports, yet we don't sightsee at any of the cities we travel to. How dumb is that?
Yeah. A waste of time. So do you have any examples that are most pertinent for you as far as how any high performers, how athletes have benefited from your coaching? I know you gave the one story. That was an awesome story. The soccer girl and the badassness. And Is there anything else that comes to mind when you think about how athletes have benefited from your services?
It's hard for it to be measured. And so this isn't like, I feel this is a projection. It sounds like a cop out, but when you take a step back and like, okay, how do you measure like the relationship with parents and like athletes? If their performance increases, the results are better. Is that because of one call a week with me for 5 weeks, or is it? So I'm still figuring out a metric that's unique to mental strength coaching, because what I'm doing, it's just a piece of the whole picture. And so if an identity piece or changing the way an athlete shows up for practice by 5%, like that's going to have a positive effect on the results. But is that a byproduct of the coaching? Oh, I don't think so. I think an athlete changes the way they show up. A good coach sees a difference, and then that coach gives more or changes or pushes harder, and so it influences so many different things. I've messed up too. I've been on a call on a Friday before a tournament with an athlete dealing with pressure, and the first match they ever like quit in the middle of the matchup happened that weekend. And so what I'm getting at is I don't know what's measurable yet from mental strength coaching.
That's a solid answer. So that kind of leads me to two questions then. And one of them being, does that make selling your services difficult? Which I'd love you to talk about. And two, how do you build a sense of satisfaction around what you've done then as a coach also?
So selling a soft skill is tough. And so mindset's a soft skill. It's not something that you can like measure. You can't measure improved communication. So it's a soft skill. And so yes, it makes it tough to sell. And at the same time, that's one of the reasons why I've branded it as mental strength. Why I'm not a mindset coach. Why I'm not a mental performance. It's mental strength. And that idea of it's the opposite of mental weakness. We see teenage athletes lose their shit in competition. We see them lose focus. We see that lack of confidence, and it seems to be growing among like teenagers. Like I don't know if it's growing or it's more acceptable to talk about. When I say, hey, I can help with confidence, I can help with focus, I can help with this emotional control. And well, how do you do it? It's look at language, address the inner voice, start setting goals with the process and identity, where the focus shifts to the identity. It's going to have an effect on these three things. Now, what is that effect? It varies. It varies from athlete to athlete. Oh, by the way, I include parents in the process. So after every call, like you're going to get a text recap of what we talked about. So if you want to hold your kid accountable, if you want to be a positive influence in this area, then you know where to start the conversation. Yeah. And so selling the services like that way, if there's someone that's open to the conversation, usually 3 out of 4 conversations turn into at least the package of 3.
3 1-hour calls with you?
Three calls. I shoot for an hour, between an hour and hour 15. But if we get on a roll with something, like I don't schedule anything. I block off at least an hour and a half per call, but I try to be done in under an hour 15. Sometimes it takes some warming up before we get into the meat of the call. And so I've gotten much better at that. What was the second question? Oh, satisfaction.
Yeah. How do you maintain a sense of satisfaction around what you're doing then, if it is so hard to measure? How do you get to feel good about the job you've done? Or do you displace the results they got as it could have been this, or it could have been that, or it could have been,
I really like the one-on-one coaching. And so like I feel like I'm one of my friends called me a true coach. I'm like, what do you mean, dude? He goes, no, when you coach someone, you walk away energized. And I was like, yeah, that's true. Like so my satisfaction comes from the idea that I'm planting seeds to trees that I might never see the tree grow.
I love that.
It's I want these kids that I'm working with to dominate their 20s with skills that are just part of who they are. And like I get my fulfillment from that, from sharing the language talks, from when a kid tells me the name of their evil inner voice, like when we name it, and
Right.
like it's such a cool, like a cool like experience. Like one of the kids, she named hers number two, and I'm like, number two. And she goes, yeah, I remember you mentioning Austin Powers, and like I saw that movie, so like number two. And then
Oh my
like,
God, hell yeah.
yeah, and then she goes, it also like makes me feel second best, and then it's also
Yeah.
like taking a dump. I'm like, all right, number two, number two it is.
Oh my God, that's awesome. That's
so,
awesome.
so hearing stuff like that like makes it so like is rewarding, it's fulfilling.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's perfect. And so that's even a better answer than I could have expected because you're getting the reward, the satisfaction from the process itself, rather
yes,
than, from okay, well, whatever results they end up getting is only secondary to who they're becoming and who they might become through the seeds I planted now.
no,
Yeah.
no.
So go ahead if you have something else. Yeah.
There's an exercise that I did with a couple with a high school program and then a summer camp, and it's called 30 before 30. So list out 30 things that you want to accomplish before you're 30 years old, and then once that's done, what can you do in the next year or 2 years? What do you want to get done before you're 18? Like things like that. It's so cool, like when someone has sent me a message like, hey, I did it. I did number 28. I'm like, what was 28? And then they tell me like, one of the things. And I've gotten that a few times, like years afterwards. Yeah.
Dang. And that list has stayed with them. That list is something that they've continued working towards
Yeah.
far beyond your coaching sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when they're telling me the specific numbers also like means they had to look back at their list to see what that number was. So they had it somewhere. Like that's,
Yeah.
you know, so
That's meaningful. Yeah.
yeah.
Is there any common misconceptions then that people come into sessions with, whether about your work or about what mental toughness is, what mental strength is? Is there anything that comes to mind as far as myths and misconceptions?
There's two. The first is you only get mental strength coaching if there's an issue. That it's trauma counseling. And no, like it could be a part of every athlete's training. And even if you're mentally strong as a 13-year-old, doesn't mean those 13-year-old tactics are going to carry you through 15, 18, 22. And so mental strength training is something that can be trained at any level. The other is that it's information like school. Oh, I've got the information, taken the test, I'm good. No, it's something that needs to be applied. It's something that once you learn the information, there's no difference between not knowing it and not applying it in terms of your results. And so you have to know it, you have to apply it before you see like a change. And so some of the conversations I've had with athletes is, oh, I know this. I'm like, cool. Are you doing it? Like, are you mindful of your words? Are you like, yeah, I'm like, dude, no, you're not. I literally just saw that last match. Like, I heard what you ask yourself. like,
Yeah.
including the bad words that were there. So you might know it, but now if once you know the information, it's about like the accountability piece and creating strategies so that you can apply it.
So then with that piece, then how might, let's say someone buys the 3-pack, which is the most minimum thing they could do, and or even someone could have been working with you for a year or two. How might you suggest that they would continue to evolve that practice once you guys are no longer working together?
One is writing down thoughts. And so not just like not journaling, not recording what happened, not whining about the day before, right? But being mindful of what's going on in your head and writing it down without judgment, without like, this happened, this is what I thought, this happened, this is what I said, like getting it out of your head and then looking at the words, looking at the language. One of my goals is not to work with athletes for years. It's hey, take this information and then move on. Take this information and we'll touch base once every 2 months. Like once the basics are in place, once you hear that evil inner voice separate from yourself, that changes the game as far as those like self-deprecating thoughts, those limiting beliefs of not being good enough. Once you recognize that soft talk creates ambiguity and that negations put the focus on the thing you don't want to focus on, eliminating those two things or translating it in your head, in your thoughts, like is incredibly powerful. When you ask yourself a circular question like, what are you doing? How could you miss? Why is this happening to me? Then recognizing that, hey, take a step back, answer the question. Answer the question in a way that doesn't create more of that same frustration. Yeah. Break the circle. Yeah.
Gabriel Monte talks about something that's very similar in that regard. I suppose like saying a statement to yourself, like, what is wrong with me, versus like, compassionate inquiry of like, what is wrong with me? Why did I miss that shot?
Yeah.
Compassionately inquiring into what's going on there. Yeah. That's a powerful one.
And once athletes have that, then they don't need a weekly call. And that's the goal, is for there to be that evolution.
So then what would, if someone at home, because it's something that I think is powerful, and I know that like a lot of people are needing to replace the thoughts that are going on in their head. We've talked about power phrases, kind of touched on affirmations, but how might you begin if you were to sit down with someone to help them develop those for themselves, or for a listener at home to be like, okay, I want to have my own power phrases. What are some quick tips and tricks for someone to develop their own power phrases?
It starts with understanding the reticular activating system. And so the reticular activating system, or the RAS, is a small cluster, of neurons in our brain that filters out everything that we don't think is important. And so to adjust that to something we think is important is we got to bring our attention to it. So if I start the day with reading 5, 10, 30 affirmations, my reticular activating system becomes attuned to those things. And so it influences how I behave. And so the first thing is how do you want to be when you're taking a test? How do you want to be when that boss that's micromanaging you is up in your shit? How do you want to be when you show up to practice knowing that the coach is going to be hard as far as getting energy and intensity up? Or how do you want to be when your teammates that are there to socialize and catch up start pulling you into it? And so if you answer whatever realm identify the realm that's most important to you right now or in the near future, and then answer the question of how do you want to be in that situation? How do you like? And that's the start. That's the start of creating a mantra or an affirmation. I want to be
And then,
tough. I want to be focused. Yeah.
so then do you have them say it as a I want to be, or is it as like an I am, or what's the ultimate like
So
phrasing for that in your
so
opinion?
so the ultimate phrasing is I am, but I'll start with like how do you want to be? And so we'll go through that, and then the one word game is thinking of a phrase or sentence as an equation. If you change one word in that equation, put another word in it, or add a word, it changes the feeling.
So taking out like what I want to be versus I
I
am.
am, yeah. And
Got it.
so, but the lowest hanging fruit to get someone to like think that way is like, because if you start sometimes when you start with I am, they're like, but I'm not that. Like, like,
It creates resistance.
yeah, yeah. How can I be focused when Sally like is chatting me up? Like, like, so hey, I want to be focused. Okay, cool. Breathe into that, and then yeah,
And then eventually it starts to activate the reticular activation system and they start to find evidence of
yeah.
how maybe they are focused. And then eventually that can shift into something like I am focused.
So eventually, in a call in one session. So if you wrote out 3 I want to be statements and we changed it to I ams, and then we added extremely or like add something about those words, incredibly, extremely, like making it more,
More powerful.
then all it takes is reading it once or twice with breath, changing a word, reading it once or twice with breath, changing a word, reading it once or twice with the breath, and then we have something that's like unique to that person. And so the eventually happens in that one call.
Nice.
But
And is that
if
something? Go ahead.
but if I want to like is more believable than I am, then they keep I want to.
Hmm. Is that something that you'd have them do just in the morning or whenever they want, just as much as they can? What's your recommendation there on how often to kind of use that?
The A, like if you want an A, you write it out in your own handwriting, you put it on a mirror, and you say it aloud with breath in the morning. If you want the A plus plus, like you do it in the evening too. And so the idea that in the morning you're priming yourself to be that thing. You're priming yourself by writing it, by seeing it, by saying it, by hearing it. You're using more of your senses in that creation.
Mm.
When you do it in the evening, what it does is it takes the context of the entire day, and when it's shifted to long-term memory, it's put through that filter of those affirmations. And
Got it.
so, yeah.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So, last question. Is there any books, resources, speakers, coaches? What do you recommend for resources for people to learn more about this stuff? I'm huge into reading. I'm not sure how much you love to read. Everyone has their own way of intaking information. What might you suggest in people to move themselves forward and getting more of this content in their lives?
There's a series that I just started. It's What Drives Winning. And like I was turned off by the title until like my coworker or the head coach at Collins, like, no, this is great. Like, just take a look at it. And it's so much of stories and identity and exercises as far as like creating a winning culture that's not result driven. And so one of the cool tips from that book is actually creating a glossary of terms for your team, for your students, for your athletes. And I implemented that tip immediately. And so one of them was like, what's the definition of positive. Yeah. And so his definition in that book is good and useful. So you can literally be getting your butt kicked, messed up 4 times in a row, and still be positive under that definition of good and useful. The other book that sticks out is Daniel Coyle. So both the Talent Code and Culture Code. And those, like, as far as like, I feel like those 2 books really changed and influenced like how I coach.
Nice. Okay. Anything else at all? Any other coaches that you look up to?
I follow Brian Cain. I had through the mental performance mastery. We haven't got to. I have that education, and then Mark England with Enlifted, which was one of your previous guests. Like, that dude is exactly what he seems. And so same message, same energy, same intensity.
I'm gonna get Brian Cain on here too. Watch. He hasn't responded to me yet though, but I'll get he's a busy guy, man. I know he literally time blocks his 15 minutes, 15-minute increments and stuff. So he'll find time to respond to me at some point, and I'll get him on here. Yeah, those guys are awesome. Sure. Mark England, Brian Cain, definitely guys to look into. The Talent Code, the Culture Code, and What Drives Winning. You said that's a book as well?
By Brett Ledbetter.
Okay, definitely. And then where can they find you?
The best place is Instagram, Athlete First Mindset. So it's all one word.
First Mindset. Okay, I'll put that on the screen.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
And then the books for sale, Mental Strength Toolbox is for sale on Amazon. And it's, when we were deciding what to put in there, it was simply, should every athlete or parent know this? Does this benefit every athlete and parent? And the reason why we landed on the name Toolbox is it's literally a toolbox. Every 2 or 3 pages, it's a different topic. It's every section can stand alone on its own.
That's good. Now I think that's how it should be. I think everybody should be focused on building a toolbox for themselves, which touches back onto something in your book, which is a way versus the way. It's like everyone wants to know the way, and it's like, well, if you build a toolbox, you can have many different ways in which you might go about solving different problems, which makes you more adaptable, more able to evolve in life, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, man, it was an honor having you on the show. It was a great talking with you. 2 hours flew by, and I appreciate you, man. I hope you enjoyed everything.
This was great, and I'd love to do it again in the future when you start recycling. I enjoyed it. Love this conversation.
No, me too, man. And I'm excited to see where athletes takes you. I'm excited to see if you can kind of build that framework out and get in front of bigger and bigger stages. I see that for you. So make sure you see that for yourself as well.
I appreciate that, and I do, brother.
Oh yeah. All right, man. You enjoy your day.